In my previous video, I argued that leftists should be learning languages to allow for a more genuine form of internationalism to flourish in our movement. However, there is one specific language that I want to encourage everyone to learn. A language that can massively decrease the language barriers that are dividing the world today if we learn it as a second language. This language is Esperanto, a constructed language made by Zamenhof in the 1800s. Why Esperanto is awesome? We'll get back to it. First, we need to identify the problem we're trying to solve. Part 1. English sucks. They say that English is the international language. Everyone speaks English, right? You might believe that. I certainly did, before someone made me aware of how few people actually speak English. I'll go over some stats very briefly here now, but if you want a tiny bit more detail, watch my previous video. So, the largest estimate of how many people speak English, native speakers and second language speakers combined, is 2 billion. If that number was correct, it would mean that less than a third of the world's population speak English. Now put into the mix that most people that speak fluent English at the B2 level either live in specific parts of Europe or are privileged people from other countries, with very few exceptions. That should be enough to conclude that English for the working class, the international proletariat, isn't really an international language at this point. However, that's not the entire picture. 2 billion might be greatly exaggerated. Actually, it's double of other estimates. The estimates vary between 750 million to 2 billion. And I don't know what number is correct. But if the number 1.5 billion is correct, it means that 6 billion people do not speak any English at all. International language, my ass. That's not the end of the story though. The fact that we're trying to make a language that some people speak natively become the international language is actually really unfair, and is not exactly helping the socialist movement either. You might notice my Norwegian accent. You might also notice that I make grammar errors quite often, and that I just farted. I hope that wasn't. My autocorrect software surely does. However, not to sound braggy or anything, but I speak English quite well. A very large reason why I do is because I speak Norwegian natively, which is closely related to English. So, compared to, for example, a Japanese English learner, I didn't really have to learn much. And you English-speaking people didn't have to learn shit. So we have a situation where how well you speak the so-called international language is to a very large degree determined by where you're born. This helps to establish and reinforce privileges for English-speaking countries and countries with languages closely related to English, which is mostly Western Europe, by the way. Coincidence? Maybe actually, but almost not. Well, how does it do this? Well, there are two main ways I would like to point out. One way is that since English-speaking countries are superior in their English skills, they have, to a dangerously high degree, an extreme international media dominance. I watch YouTube. Too much, to be fair. And where are the people I mainly watch from? Well, they are mostly from the US, the UK, Australia, and Canada. Like, not even Norway. When teenagers watch television shows, they'll probably have the same pattern. I don't really watch them, so don't ask me. This is also true for pop music, blogs. You get the idea. Now, you could argue, of course, that when people are mainly watching YouTube from those countries, they're being Eurocentric and maybe even implicitly racist. And there is some truth to that. Many people are not willing to watch content made by people with other accents than those from the countries I mentioned. That's the problem, and we should work within ourselves to counteract that impulse if we have it. But it doesn't change the fact that it is a problem of language as well. Another thing is, of course, debates and discussions. If you're native in a language, you obviously have a huge fucking advantage in those situations compared to other people. This also reinforces hierarchies that are harmful. Part 2. Why Esperanto? A quick disclaimer, in this video I don't attempt to answer any of the questions related to organization in Esperanto. You know, how to make Esperanto take off. That will be, if the international language was a language where no accent could be viewed as the correct one, this situation would simply be eliminated. There wouldn't be a large advantage in information flow for certain countries. But is Esperanto suited for such a task? Are there any more advantages to Esperanto than the simple fact that no country speaks it natively? Well, yeah. One of the biggest advantages for Esperanto is its extremely simple grammar. The grammar is simple enough that you can basically learn it next weekend if you want to. There are incredibly few conjugations of like anything, and they are completely regular. That means no conjugation exceptions in any verb or any other word for that matter. If you can conjugate one verb, you can conjugate every single one of them. I've spent tens of hours in school just learning verb conjugations, exceptions, and English. Esperanto just doesn't have them. Pronunciation is also completely regular. All words are pronounced exactly as they're written, with zero exceptions. No pointless letters hidden inside words waiting for you to forget them. Words ending with an O are nouns, like arbo. Words ending with an I are verbs, like luri. Any words ending with an A is an adjective, like ruja. Any words ending with an e are adverbs. Yeah. This makes it much easier to guess by context what something means. But what I've mentioned isn't the best part. What's the most genius, in my opinion, is the way Esperanto uses suffixes and prefixes on words systematically to create new words, leading to you having to learn far, and by that I mean far fewer words. Let's look at some examples. In English, warm means warm. Nothing wrong about that. However, cold is cold, even though cold really just is the opposite of warm. In Esperanto, it isn't like that. Warm is varma, and cold is malvarma. Sana means healthy, malsana means sick. Bona means good, malbona means bad. That was one example of how this way of building words work. My favorite word in Esperanto is malsanulejo. Mal, not, malsan, sick, malsanulo, sick person, malsanulejo, not healthy person place or sick person place. In English, that's hospital. Arbo, tree. Arbaro, forest. Arbusto, bush. Arbeto, small tree, or that could also mean bush. Now, I just gave a bunch of examples without any good explanation. The takeaway I hope for you to have is that this is systematic. You actually need to learn far fewer words when you're learning Esperanto compared to other languages. And for anyone that hasn't learned a language themselves before, just keep in mind that you'll typically have to learn tens of thousands of them to speak it like a native. That's huge. So, to summarize, this is a language that is not biased towards any specific country, has almost no grammar, and the grammar that is there is extremely simple, without any exceptions, and you have to learn far fewer words to speak the language well. To me, That being the international language seems like a huge democratization that would have been worth it even if English in fact was a truly international language, which it is not. Now, I know some of you are watching this thinking, but Esperanto is Eurocentric. Well, part 3, too Eurocentric? Well, I'll just admit it straight out. Esperanto is Eurocentric. Most of the vocabulary comes from European languages. The same is true for the grammar. However, it does not clearly belong to any other language family than the Indo-European family, which is quite large, as you can see, a huge improvement. That being true, I still don't think it makes English a better alternative. The advantages I have mentioned are true for a learner no matter where they're from. If you're learning a language that's completely different from your own in most ways, it is nice that you at least don't need to learn 1,000 different fucking verb conjugations with another million exceptions. And the systematic use of prefixes and suffixes dramatically reduces the number of words you need to learn. That's especially helpful if the words are very strange from your perspective. Of course, if there was a language with the same advantages as Esperanto, but with vocabulary from all over the world, it would have been a better alternative. I'm not creating a new language anytime soon, but if you make that language, I'll both learn it and promote it, that's for sure. How to learn Esperanto? If Esperanto is ever going to be able to take off, learning it and organizing it is step 1. What will I recommend an aspiring Esperanto learner? Well, here's one suggestion. Start with Duolingo. I'm not even sure if you will have to finish the course before you move on. I didn't. This is a good tool just to start developing a feeling for the language, and use the streak function, guys. Then, either after using Duolingo or at the same time as you're using it, I would suggest using an application called Curso. It basically teaches you all the Esperanto grammar there is in about 2 weeks, if you do one lesson a day. After some Duolingo and Curso, you're basically ready to start consuming content and begin speaking the language. This can actually take only like 2 months, depending on how much time you spend on the language. So, what content are you going to consume? Evil Dia is a quite funny vlogger, making the majority of his videos in Esperanto, so that's one suggestion. Tandem and Amikumu are tools you could use to get in touch with other Esperantists and start speaking. Amikumu has the advantage that it will help you finding local Esperantists, but in my experience it is easier to find someone on Tandem. You should use both. You should also look online to see if your area has an Esperanto organization. That can get you some real-life friends. Esperantists are quite often progressive, by the way, so I'm sure you'll get along. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, I would appreciate you leaving a like here and clicking on the subscribe button and the bell. Yes, I asked for you to click on the bell. Please, my friend, click on the bell.